Hello, my name is David. I'm making videos about things that I want to talk about. I still haven't figured out any sort of intros for these, but I'm doing as I may and as I want. Hello, welcome to the final installation of the Magnus Archives Season 5 Kill Count. I'll do a better introduction to it. But either way, for those of you in the know, the Magnus Archives is written by Johnny Sims and directed by Alexander D. Newell, produced by Rusty Quill. Horror podcast. I am obsessed with the Magnus Archives so much. I cannot stop thinking about it. And this is a culmination of all of that, honestly. So, I love horror, I love Magnus Archives, and been making these videos that are really great. Shout out to the Dead Meat channel, run by James A. Janice, and his show, The Kill Count, which inspired all of this. He counts the kills in our favorite horror media, which is, what I want to emulate here. So go check out his videos, they're really, really good, really fun. Normally, I would list off some of the rules. We all know the rules now, right? First, I'm only counting people that are either important people, or 2, killed by someone important. 3, we must have seen or experienced their death. And 4, it must not be backstory. There are some exceptions where we'll be counting thematic stuff or implied stuff in terms of deaths. However, Season 5 is a little bit different because of the structure and the logic and lack thereof of the apocalypse, the change. So, some kills may be iffy. There are going to be some people that I kill that aren't actually people, but because we see it's a human reflection, idea, someone dies. Whether they were real or not, that doesn't really matter because it was still used in the show to show horror. And that's what the important part for me. So, there's going to be some people that on the list that I'm like, are they really people though? And we'll get to those when we get to those. So, either way. The Magnus Archives, Season 5 Kill Count. Season 5, like I said before, is very different in its structure and its creative ambitions. I would say Season 5 is my least favorite season. However, for this video specifically, I did re-listen to most of it to sort of catch up and regroup and re-listen to see and learn. And I like Season 5 a lot more than I did prior. Season 5 has some strange dream logic to it, and some deaths are not permanent, but that's not a bad thing at all. We'll get into it, but anyways, welcome to Season 5, Magnus Archives Kill Count. To begin with, episodes 161, Dwelling, and 162, A Cozy Cabin. No one dies in here. We have John and Martin in the cozy cabin, and in Dwelling, John is listening to audio the tapes, that's it, that are talking about like things that happened in the past and recontextualizing a little bit of different things and stuff like that. We get Gertrude talking to Jurgen, and then we get Gertrude talking to Jerry in the second episode. It's a lot of it's not a clip show. It feels like a clip show to me, but it's not a clip show. It's literally like adding in some new things about the past, which feels sort of like filler in a way. Either way, I don't want to get off into a tangent here. No one dies in these 2 episodes. In episode 163, In the Trenches, we have kills 1 through 4. This is where we begin to talk about the weird dream logic. So some people, we know that in episode 178, Processing Line, John says that most of the people that we see are just set dressing and just a grim reflection of our fears. And we know that some people would die, but not really, because it's dream logic and they're not allowed to die, etc., etc. More instances we will see in the coming episodes. But we're just gonna roll with it. Number 1 is Ryan, who was killed by a bullet through his head. We don't know if Ryan was someone who was trapped or was a person created by the fears. Either way, his head exploded, and that's enough of a kill for me. Number 2 is the man in the gunner's chair who had his jaw ripped off when I think the gunner, like, it was a tank or something like that crashed and his jaw was ripped off. That's enough of a kill for me as well, considering this man might not be a real person. Number 3 is Charlie, who was crushed by a tank. And number 4 is Alexei, whose heart was plucked out by a jolly man. This definitely feels inspired by, like, the propaganda around the time of war in World War II, World War I, where there's, like, the bigwigs who were up in the government, and they're, like, sending the people, your son's down to war, and they were profiting, because I think he also took the heart and put it into his wallet, too. Which is, you know, really, I feel like it's very much inspired by the war profiteering and stuff like that. Either way, we do see Charlie, who was crushed by a tank, wake up in the infirmary again. And so here's another sort of thing. It was like, okay, if someone dies, but they know they come back, it was the process. We still saw he got crushed by a tank. He got crushed by a tank. I don't know. You know, there are some people here that, like, they died and they come back to life, but that's dream logic. So I'm still gonna count him even though he comes back to life later. We've seen that a lot with the avatars. And this still feels significant because he does not remember when he comes back to life, because it's a nightmare. Numbers 5 through 7 come from episode 164, The Sick Village. First, we have a mention of an outsider who was burned to death by the sick village. This was a hypothetical, and not hypothetical so much so as, like, they're talking about what they would do. And then they mention a moment of when their outsider is being burnt to death because of by the sick village. So this outsider might also be a creation by the fears, not an actual person. But either way, someone was burning alive, and that's enough of a kill for me as well. Number 6 is Mrs. Kim, who was also burnt to death by a sick village. She might, I mean, you know, they're not allowed to die, so they'll just keep going through this cycle. But she burned to death. And number 7 is Jillian Smith. She was watching Mrs. Kim burn, and then she bloomed. She died. That's her death. That's her dying from, like, a sickness and then, like, spreading the sickness, and then, you know, that all begins over and over. We know that there's a cycle. I'm not going to talk about the cycle anymore. They died. Here we go. In episode 165, Revelations, we have kill number 8, which is the not Sasha, who's killed by Johnson. She appears after John does his poetry of the stranger, and John and Martin are going through the carnival, and she, like, slinks up. She's like, hi. She calls Martin positively roomy, and then John's like, well, she can't have us, right? And she can't kill us because we're too powerful. And she's like, your friend suffered. And he was like, what did you say? What did you say? Ceaseless watcher. And kills her. Which, you know, when I was first listening to this, oh my gosh, hearing her screaming and the audio distortion.
No! No! Please, no!
Beautiful, stunning, amazing. Not Sasha, she served. Number 9 comes from episode 166, The Worms. We have Richard, who's one of the worms in the buried, muddy place. He was killed by Sam the Worm. The first person in the statement was Sam. And he was digging through, like, the tunnels, or the ground, and he finds himself in Richard's tunnel, and then it's implied that Sam basically, like, bites and scratches him to death, which is ill. Episode 167, Curiosity, we have kills 10 through 13. This is my favorite episode of season 5. We have first Angus Stacy, whose face was torn from his skull by the Grinning Wheel, which is a stranger monster, I assume. Then we have, for number 11, the Grinning Wheel itself, which was killed by Gertrude Robinson by fire. Next, we have Sarah Carpenter for number 12, who was killed by a man who burned on the inside. He opened up, and she went in, and then died. And then for number 13, we have Emma Harvey, who was killed by Gertrude Robinson as well. Technically, she was killed by Agnes Montague, but it feels more right to say that Gertrude killed her by sending Agnes Montague. Either way, Emma Harvey, sir. Fiona Law is still alive in the coffin. We know Eric Delano had died or disappeared and then died, and I already counted him, so I'm not going to talk about it again. And yeah, this is my favorite episode of season 5, and I'm really happy to count these. Episode 168, The Roots. Strangely, no one dies in this domain of the end. We get mention of Danica, who is walking the roots and keeps seeing her death, or like having the fear of her death, and she's heading towards it. And we are described her death, her getting a blood clot and it like killing her and stuff like that. However, it's sort of like, this is the first time we sort of see in the Magnus Archives where someone's like, oh yeah, this is going to happen in the future. But it hasn't happened yet. She hasn't died yet. Yes, we experienced a death. However, it hasn't happened. It's going to happen, but it hasn't happened. And the fact that it's going to happen and we don't know when, because it could happen within the time that John and Martin are like walking through, going to London, but we don't know that. So in technicality, Danica is not dead yet, even though we have experienced her death. So I'm not counting her. Episode 169, Fire Escape, we have kills 14 through 16. 14 and 15 are going to be Sabina's father and mother. These are not real people. They were fully created to scare Sabina in this desolation domain. I will say that they were killed by Arthur Nolan because the statement keeps mentioning a male landlord not fixing the stuff that causes them to die. And because they were used to scare Sabina, and we heard their voices, you know, John saying, "We're burning!
Oh,
Please help us, we're burning!" That is enough for me to count these two people, even though they're not real people. Same thing with, like, other people that we've seen before that are not real. And then number 16, we have Jude Perry herself, who was killed by John Sims. I had before in my notes that Jude Perry had killed Sabina's father and mother because she appears later in that episode. However, like I said before, the statement keeps mentioning a male landlord and not a female landlord. So she's just kind of there, and she shows up and talks to John and Martin. She's like, ha ha ha, I would have still hurt you even if I knew this was going to happen. And then John's is going to kill her, and she's like, actually, let me live, maybe, please. And then he doesn't, and he kills her. Same with the ceaseless watcher, turn your gaze upon this wretched thing sort of thing. So Jude Perry, I wish she actually killed a lot more people so I can count more kills for her, but you know, she died. So Jude Perry, I like her a lot. Actually, I think she's a really interesting character, especially because a lot of her fear that we have about her is secondhand in terms of other people being afraid of her, but we don't actually see anything about her besides like her past and what she described in her like season 3 episode. But yeah, Jude Perry, rip in peace. Actually, no. Rip in not peace, because she was evil. Episode 170, Recollection. This is where Martin is trapped in that house, and he keeps forgetting who he is, and is sort of trapped. No one dies here. The lonely episodes, no one really dies. We'll see that a lot. It's a neat episode. I love when he forgets and then looks at the recording. He's like, yo, retro. That was really funny. Number 17 comes from 171, The Gardener. We have Jared Hopworth, who's killed by John Sims. We have John and Martin arriving at the garden. I forget, it had a full name to it. I forget what the name was. And Jared is there cultivating people and making them strung out and stuff. None of those people are dead. They're dying or suffering. But no one dies there. We only have Jared, who is he asked for a fight or something like that, and John and Martin are like, no, we can just kill you now. And he's like, okay, but before you do that, can you tell me about my garden so I can go peacefully? And so John does, and then Jared's like, okay, I accept it. And then John kills him, and that's the end of Jared Hopworth, the Bone Turner, which was, I feel like, out of all of the people, I'll talk about all of the people that John killed in a minute, but Jared's is really interesting for me. In episodes 172, Strung Out, 173, Night, 174, The Great Beast, and 175, Epoch. No one dies in all of them. A little note, of course, with Strung Out, we have Francis, who is being hung by a spider in the theater, and they're like being made to do their like addictive stuff, and then when they choose to have their addiction, the spiders like fall into their mouth and they're like, but I don't feel like that's a death, like that's just a torture. And they, you know, restart and keep doing the same thing, which is this is the first time we actually see like, or second time because we saw it with Charlie, but this is the next time that we see like it is a reoccurring thing that keeps happening and stuff like that. And so, you know, I'm not going to count Francis because the spiders filling your body and your mouth are like messed up, but I don't think they died here. If you think that I should count Francis, let me know. 173, Night, we have John and Martin go into a dark domain and see Callum Brody, who is like, yeah, what do you want? Callum Brody mentions that his father is dead, but that was a while ago, I think, and also, like, we never saw it, so I'm not counting his father either. The Great Beast, we have a woman, I forget her name, running from a giant thing that is blocking out the sun, and then a guy on that thing trying to, like, hang on. No one dies here. We have Simon Fairchild appearing, and John and Martin like, hey, Martin's like, hey, John, do it, kill him. And John's like, and then Simon Fairchild's like, peace. So he doesn't die here. And then in 175, Epoch, it's John sort of like talking about this woman who keeps recording the different things about the extinction. I wish there was more of extinction, like, domains in season 5, but, you know, for this one, it was pretty cool. But no one dies here either. 18 through 20 come from episode 176, Blood Ties. First, we have the Prey, who's killed by the Pack. You know, we have the statement of, like, the Pack that are like, running around, and they killed the Prey. And then we have, like, right after the Prey, one of the Pack becomes a Prey and they run, but we don't see anyone else die from that, so we just hear, like, them killing the Prey itself. Number 19 is Julia Montauk, who was killed by Daisy. We know this because Trevor appeared and took Martin hostage and was telling John, like, hey, you, shut your trap, you avatar. And he mentions that, like, he's been chasing after Daisy because Daisy killed Julia. And then Trevor Herbert himself is shot by Basira. She, like, shows up and, like, shoots him. And Martin's like, oh my god, I got blood all over me. And then we have Basira up in like, everything as well. Number 21 comes from episode 177, Wonderland. This is... I've seen a lot of people love Dr. David. I don't care for Dr. David. I don't care for him. Anyways, number 21 is Noah Thompson, who was one of the victims of Daisy, who was killed by Daisy. We find him in the hospital and he's, like, torn apart or whatever. He was the guy that, when he was trying to escape from Daisy, he blinded someone else. And so Daisy, like, chased after him in this, like, world because she was like, he got off too easy or whatever, and that's why she killed him. Number 22 and 23 come from episode 178, The Processing Line. First, we have Tyler, who was the person giving the statement. He's the one in the processing line, and he's, like, going around, and they keep, like, taking pieces off of his body. And at the very end, he gets most of his body removed. And then it's tossed out because nothing useful. And so I think he goes back into the processing line, and then it was written that he's gone. And that feels to me like he died because he didn't have most of his body left. Of course, he comes back to life, but whatever. He died. Like, I would assume that if you have most of your meat ripped off of you, you die. And then number 23, we have Isabella Moran, who was a victim that John, Martin, and Basira stumbled upon, killed by Daisy. And we have here, fun fact, I don't know if I expressed it enough in my first video, but I was listening to Magnus Archives on random on my bike ride a while ago, and 132 Entombed came on, and then right after that One CBD, the processing line, came on, and both of them dealt with Daisy and her thoughts about, like, the police force and criminals and stuff like that. And so that got me to start talking about the Magnus Archives, and that got me to write and film the season 4 retrospective video that I have. So 178 has a little special place in my heart because it started this sort of thing for me. Anyways, most of those people in the line as well are fake, but we only see Tyler being processed. Numbers 24 to 26 we have from episode 179, Accomplice. First, we have a body in a cart, who is just a body in a cart that Derek was sort of like scooping through, and he finds the body. And I'm counting it because I counted the dead bodies in the eyewitnesses, where Daisy finds her childhood best friend surrounded by like 2 dead bodies, because we didn't see them die, but we see their body. It feels right to me to count that because it's used for the horror as well, to find just a dead body in that cart. It's also mentioned that Derek's father was killed by Derek and his friend. I forget his friend's name, but that's backstory. So I'm not counting Derek's father. 25, we have Derek, who was killed by Daisy. We witnessed this. We witnessed him like scooping through, and then like it's written really interestingly because everything is supposed to be a nightmare to everyone. It's a very like interesting description of like Daisy and like the hunt and stuff like that. So we have Derek, who witnesses it all, but he may not be dead. Something like that. I like that writing a lot. And then 26, we have Daisy herself, who is killed by Basira. Basira is pointing a gun at her, and Daisy's like, "Come join me in the hunt. Come join me." And Basira is like, "I can't," and then shoots her. And then that's when Daisy, John, and Martin sort of like split off, and Daisy's like, "I have to deal with my own stuff right now." And yeah, that's a really pivotal moment in this season. Episode 180, Moving On, and 181, Ignorance, No One Dies. First, in 180, we have John and Martin walking through the Acropolis. The woman, I don't know why, I keep thinking it's a woman in the statement, but I don't believe there's any pronouns. Either way, they are walking through, and then they're like talking about the old woman in the coffin, who everyone keeps praising. I'm not counting the old woman because that is a dead person that is fake, so no. And she comes back to life and then attacks the person, and it's just a shoulder bite, so I'm not going to say that they died from a shoulder bite. It's implied that they probably are. It's like lightly implied that they are like attacked, but I can't count that. And in Ignorance, we have, of course, John and Martin arriving at Upton House, and then meeting with Michele. Michele, I've said his name 3 different ways in this series. Michele Salesa. And he mentions 2 artifacts, but there are no individuals for those artifacts, like a bloody leather pouch, blood money, and a painting for the lonely. But there's no individuals for that, so I can't count that. And they also mentioned that there's an insect thing that appeared, but Annabelle Cain dealt with it. So I don't know what dealt with it means. She could have just sent it away or killed it. I don't know, so I can't count that either. 27 comes from 182, Well-being. We have Dr. Jane Doe, or is she a doctor or she's just a nurse? I forget. Whatever. She like shows up. She has knives for hands. And John and Martin are like, we have to go see all this medical malpractice. And at the very end, Martin meets with Breakin, and Breakin's like, "Hey, you're the archivist, aren't you?" And John's like, "Yeah, what about it?" And Breakin's like, "Can you kill me?" And Martin's like, "Why? Wouldn't you like this?" And Breakin's like, "Well, yeah, but not without hope. These gay little bitches." So Breakin's dead, killed by John Sims. Number 28 comes from episode 183, Monument. We have the doctor, who was stuck inside the monument, and he tried to escape, and then he failed because he's a victim. And he falls into like a lower area, and there's the professor, and the professor's like, "Oh yeah, there's like the stone is the answer," and the doctor is like, You're foolish for thinking the stone is the answer. And the professor takes the stone and beats him. Obviously, it's a cycle, whatever. I like he beats him. He smashes his head open with the stone. That's enough of a death for me. Episode 184, Like Ants, 185, Locked In, and 186, Quiet, No One Dies. Like Ants, we have John and Martin finding Jordan Kennedy covered by ants, and some other guy who is in love with the ants and is afraid of killing all of them if he moves. No One Dies here. Jordan Kennedy becomes an avatar of the corruption. Don't know what happens to him after the fact. Locked In, the woman is being dealt with very badly with police force. And then Quiet, we have Martin, who's lost in his own... He's not lost, he just has to go it by himself, and he has another version of himself, talking to him, and No One Dies here. They've described the two people, I think it is, people trapped in that place, and that's pretty much it. Number 29 comes from episode 187, Checking Out. We have John alone in Helen's domain, which is just a weird architecture and a hotel type deal. He witnesses a woman being terrorized by Helen, and all throughout season 5 for this, Helen has been showing up and being a little questionable. And John's like, yeah, I think you're getting a little too dangerous right now. And she's like, I can kill you. And he's like, no, you couldn't. And she's like, okay, leave then. He asks Helen if she's afraid. And there's a sound cue of wood creaking. And she says, no, I'm not. And John's like, is that a lie? And then uses that to kill her, which is really fun. I love Helen Distortion. So she's killed by John Sims. And this is the last we have of Helen, obviously. Which, great secondary, tertiary antagonist in a way. Yeah, I like this episode. Number 30 comes from 188, Center of Attention. We have Carmen, who was the statement of she cannot help but feel like she's being watched the entire time she's in London. She kicks a wall, and the plaster falls, and there's an eye the size of her face. She goes to stab it, and her hands goes through, and then she's just consumed by the eye. And I'm like, that feels like she died. I don't know what else could that be. She got eaten by the eye. Episodes 189, Piers, 190, Scavengers, 191, What We Lose, and 192, An Appointment. No One Dies. In Piers, there's a minister who's trying to deal with, the people around him. I didn't really get anything from this. And that's also when John and Martin find Melanie and Georgie in the tunnels. Scavengers is just collected sort of information about the people in the tunnels. What We Lose is more stuff about the scavengers in the tunnels. Yeah. And in 192, it's a telling of Rosie Sampano's story. Kinda. It does this episode was the most clip showy to me because it keeps recapping what happened prior and what she's witnessed prior. Number 31 and 32 come from episode 193, A Stern Look. First, we have Alan Schreiber, who was killed by a Leitner bug that, Elias Bouchard OG, it has his friend who's, in college and is, studying and stuff like that, and they, are, talking with each other about it, and Alan's like, oh my god, he keeps finding me, he doesn't have eyes, but he, crawls and, is going to kill me or whatever. And then Elias Bouchard OG finds Alan dead without his eyes. That was actually kind of creepy. It was actually very, very creepy, which is really fun. And then I am going to put Elias Bouchard onto the list, killed by Jonah Magnus. There's a little moment in the statement where Elias Bouchard OG imagines his eyes being replaced and bad stuff happening to him. I like this episode a lot, especially because it used Jonah Magnus, Elias Bouchard voice actor to voice, who is it? Alan Cartwright? Something, James Wright? To voice James Wright. Was his name James Wright? The person prior to Elias. Director. Something Wright. Whatever. I might as well say it now. I wanted to count James Wright, name pending if that's right or not. And there was someone else who was also a former director of the Institute. I wanted to count them onto the list as well, because we know that they were killed by Jonah Magnus to replace their bodies. However, I don't know when those happen. We get like estimates, but we don't see it happen. So unfortunately, I can't really count them. I would like to give Jonah Magnus a bit more kills, but it's fine. Number 33 comes from episode 194, Parting. In this, we have John and Martin have a fight, and then John goes off to do a statement, and we see a guy named Malcolm who's... So I'm not counting the old man that died, because he died previously from this moment. It's a little weird. I'm not counting him. I don't feel like counting him. And then Malcolm sees an eye grow out of his shoulder, and then the eye, like, from the eye, the old man is birthed once more. And Malcolm's sort of like on the floor, he's like, but I don't think he died from that. I mean, yeah, having someone ripping out of your shoulder feels like pretty intense, but I don't want to count that. That doesn't feel like a death. Who I am counting is Michaelis Lesa, who's killed by Annabelle Cain. We have John panicking after he notices that Martin is gone, and so he with Melanie sort of like talking like, okay, what do we do? And she was like, so what did you see? And he had popped outside and like looked, and he was like, yeah, so Michaela's dead, killed by Annabelle Cain as a mercy killing. Like Michaela had said, like, I want you to kill me if you're gonna take the camera or whatever. So yeah, we have him on the list. 195 Adrift. We have no deaths here. John is sort of rowing through the water, and he witnesses a person in the water dealing with like the vast, the dark, the buried, a lot of different things. And no one dies here. We also have him meeting up with Basira, and they're like, yeah, let's go save Martin. Numbers 34 through 38 come from episode 196, This Old House. This is probably my second favorite episode of season 5. It fights with 167, Curiosity, for like the best episode for me. Either way, this is of course where we have Annabelle Cain and Martin walking through the domains and then arriving at Hilltop Road, and Annabelle's like, here, read this statement out, and Martin reads the statement that lightly details the history of Hilltop Road. And within it, we have some kills. So first we have Ewa, who was the first person there, who, I forget what was wrong with him, but there was something wrong with him. He was running from something. He was killed by Mercians. And then we have Jeffrey Neckham, who was like a religious person who was like trying to research different stuff and try to like learn about like power and stuff. He was killed in his sleep by other people, I believe, because he knew too much or something like that. We have a sculptor of puppets who was killed by a crusading hunter. And then that crusading hunter was killed by his own wood saw. I don't know if that meant the wood saw itself killed him or someone used his wood saw to kill him. I feel like in terms of horror, because it's Hilltop Road, because of like the fears, his own wood saw killed him and not someone else using the wood saw. And then we have a writer of anonymous letters who was buried alive by a man whose teeth were always stained with mud, which is really fun. I don't know why. I just like that a lot. You know, all these different people that lived in this house, and they were all like killed in bad and gruesome ways, and that causes Hilltop Road being a little weird. Episode 197, Connected, 198, Precipice, and 199, Seeing It Through, No One Dies. In Connected, we have Martin and Annabelle in the web. Canopy is not the right word, but that's hammock. That's also not the word. Like hanging over the edge of reality. And then John and Basira arrive, and Annabelle's like, hey, this is what you have to do, okay? Listen, the web knows that you want to kill it. The web also knows that it's going to die in here. So, let's set it free into other dimensions. And John and Basira are like, ah! And then Annabelle, who turns into this spider monster, just leaves. So she's still alive. I wonder what's that's gonna happen. Anyways. In Precipice, John, Basira, and Martin are returning to London, and they have to pass through, like, this really steep cliff. And John witnesses a lot of people, like, falling. But I can't count any of them because they're not any individuals. We just see a bunch of people falling. There's no number or anything like that. So I'm like, I guess no one dies here. And they also fall, and they don't die as well. So, interesting. Seeing it through, we have John, Martin, Basira, Melanie, and Georgie talking about what to do next. And, like, what to do with, like, the horrors and stuff like that. Yeah. It's a quick episode, at least. Then finally, numbers 39 and 40, the last kills of season 5, come from episode 200, Last Words. This is, of course, when John and Martin go and try to stop the horrors. John goes in alone, and he kills Jonah Magnus / Elias Bouchard. He kills him for all the bad stuff that he's done. He's, like, beating him up. Was he killing him with a lead pipe? I forget with what. And he's very much like, this is for Sasha. This is for Tim. This is for Gertrude. This is for everyone that you hurt. And it's a really, really cathartic moment. And then John is, because he kills Jonah, the eye moves its power onto John, and John does his statement about the start of the fears and stuff like that. No one dies in in those statements. We get close to it, or we get at least mentions of, like, avatars and stuff like that. But it's really fun, great sound design, and yeah, I like that a lot. It's great finale. Eventually, Martin appears, and he's, like, angry or whatever, and stuff happens. The tower explodes. Martin has to stab John, and the fears escape. The fears are exiled. The fears are no longer in this world, and the world is returned back to normal. And at the very end, we have Basira, Melanie, and Georgie sifting through the rubble, and they mention, for number 40, they mention that it's a good thing that John and Martin were not found, because look what they did to Simon Fairchild. What did they do to Simon Fairchild? I don't know. But it's definitely implied that he was killed by an angry mob. That's the implication. It's funnier to me that he's the last person to die in the Magnus Archive season 5 and the entirety of the show. So that's who the last person to die, Simon Fairchild. And also, it's unknown if John and Martin died. I assume that we will get some answers in Magnus Protocol, but we shall see. That's it for the kill count. And now to the numbers. We have 40 total people who died in the Magnus Archive, Season 5. With 40 people killed in 40 episodes, we have an average of 1 kill per episode. Pretty minimal amount, but it is what it is. This is the total killed list in Season 5. We have John with 6 kills at the top, and Daisy with 4. Gertrude, Basira, and Arthur Nolan with 2. Jonah Magnus and Annabelle Kane with 1 kill each. John's 6 kills feel very interesting. Each of those 6 kills are very distinctive in who they were and why he killed them, etc., etc. Like I said with Jared Hopworth, it definitely felt like Jared did stuff to John antagonistically and helpfully because he took his rib to help him with the buried. Breakin did a lot of damage to them and he just resigned to death. Jonah, obviously really important, is antagonist. Not Sasha was purely out of hatred, as well as Jude Perry. And then Helen was definitely a ally / not an ally, a traitor. I don't know. It was definitely really important. She was really important, and him killing her was also just really, really big. This is the gender breakdown for season 5. we have a great, like, this is the most different pie chart we've had for any season. Surprisingly, we only have 2 unknown gender deaths in season 5, 4 monster kills, 10 women killed, and 24 men killed. And this, actually, no. I'm not going to do a full recap of the entire season here. I'll do that in another video, actually. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do, so watch out for that. So yeah, that was season 5 of the Magnus Archives, the kill count. I will be putting out a video fully recapping the season and sort of like talking about the entirety of the show and the kills and stuff like that. Really excited to do that. The statistics are really interesting and I really want to talk about them. So stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know if any of these kills I shouldn't count or should have counted because of the dream logic and etc. etc. Let me know. I'll see if I do like a redo count or something like that in the future. So thank you very much, and make sure to not become the linchpin for a ritual to destroy the world. Thank you.